Hey class, so today we are going to talk about strings and string methods. Let's get into it. So first thing we are going to talk about is the strings themselves. So let's go ahead and say I create a string S. And actually I'm going to rename that. I'm going to go ahead and call this string greeting. Use a good descriptive name, so I know what's inside my variable. I'm going to say my string greeting is going to equal hello. We've talked about this in the past, that a string is a more complex data type than our three primitive types that we need to know for the AP exam: the int, the double, and the boolean. It's more complex because it's holding more than one piece of data. Each one of these characters is its own piece of data. And essentially what happens, and I'm going to oversimplify a little bit here, but Java creates a set of each of these characters. And it sees each one of those individual characters as its own data bucket, right? Its own character bucket inside of memory. So they each get their own little bucket space. And the way that Java keeps track of where each of those buckets are is by using what's called an index. So it creates an index that starts at number 0 and counts up from there. So starts at 0 and counts up until it hits the last character, and then that's it. That's the end of the string. And this way, Java doesn't have to know what the context of those characters in the string are. It doesn't have to know the word hello. It only has to know where each character goes in line with its index. So this is an index. Now, this is going to become really useful for us in finding, searching, and creating and manipulating strings. One thing to note is that the index, the last number of the index, is always one less than the length of the string. Always one less than the length. So the word hello has 5 characters in it, but the index ends on 4. I realize I'm hammering that home a lot. That's because it's really important, and we're going to use it many times. It can run into confusion later. So the string index is always one less than the length of the actual string, or the number of characters in the string. Okay, so that's a basic rough idea of how strings are stored, or organized rather, in memory. Let's talk about how we can use and manipulate strings, and that's a bit of a misnomer. So one thing we need to know is, before we get into this, is that strings are what are called immutable. So strings themselves are not mutable. Think about what that word means for just a second. Pause the video if you need to really quick and think about what that means. What it actually means is it's broken up into 2 parts. Mutable, think of the mutants, right? In X-Men, mutable, this is changeable. And immutable means not changeable. So strings are not changeable. Whenever we manipulate a string in Java, we're either creating a copy or a brand new string. We aren't actually manipulating the string itself. So this is an important thing to remember, and is pretty key for how strings and how we manipulate strings in Java. So what are the things we can do with strings? What are some of the built-in things that we can do? So let's talk about string methods. So methods are a fancy word for doing stuff. If you come from another programming language, maybe principles, you might have heard something similar, but not the same, something similar called functions. Methods have to do with objects. So string methods, doing things to strings. Let's get into some of the important ones that you are going to need to know. The first one is our length method. So we're going to use a special operator in order to get into our methods. And our methods are going to use the dot operator. So in order to get into our length operator, or our length method, we need to use the dot operator. And we use the dot operator on the variable. So we're going to have, for example, a greeting. And this can be any variable name, right? Any variable name. And then we're going to say dot. And in this case, we would say length. So this is our first method there, dot length. And that is going to give us the length of the string. So this returns a integer length of the string. And in this case, it would return 5. So dot length is our method, and this is how we're going to write it. Lowercase length with 2 parentheses. And for most cases, when we begin to write this, we're going to have a semicolon afterwards, but that's not required. So dot length. So this would give us, and it would return, I'll go ahead and write the return in green here. This would return 5 in our case, since the word hello is 5. So in general, it returns the length of the string. Okay? I hope that's fairly obvious from the name. All right, so our next one that's pretty simple is our dot equals. So I'll give an example here. And I'm going to go ahead and write it like this for the next few. I'm going to say dot equals. So for a dot equals, and then we're going to put some other string. So some other string is going to go in here. Of type string, so we put, when we're defining how a method works, we put the type here, and then we put what goes in here. So we don't actually write this. This doesn't get written . It doesn't get written. It's information for you as the programmer of what type of data you can put in between these parentheses in order for this method to work. For example, this is how we are going to do that. Actually, let me tell you what this returns. It returns a Boolean if it's true, right? Returns Boolean if strings are equal. So it returns a Boolean if the strings are equal. An example of this. Greeting dot equals hello. What would this give me? It would return true. So greeting.equals returns true. So I could save the result of this into a Boolean. Let's learn a few others. Another really important one. Dot index of, capital O. And then we can put another string inside of here, and we can search for some string. And this returns the value of the index of the first occurrence of that string. Or -1 if not found. Example. Greeting.index of let's say EL. What is this going to return? Well, let's look back at greeting one more time. We're looking for EL. Well, we start with HE. That doesn't work. EL is our next pair. That works. So it's going to return the index of the first character that it found in that sequence that matched my search sequence. So it's going to return 1. So this is going to return 1. This is going to become my shorthand, by the way. This double arrow is going to become my shorthand for return values. I think that's an easy way to signify return values. So this is going to return 1 for us, index of EL in our greeting. Okay, next one up on the docket is our substring. Substring. Let me double check it is. Yeah, it is a lowercase. And so this is going to take an integer type of start and an integer type of end. Okay, so dot substring gives us our start and our end. It's going to return for us our string at those indexes, string between the indexes. Or I should say between start and end. And it's important to note it's between, so it does not include end. So it does not include the ending value. For example, let's say we have greeting dot substring of, let's say, 0, 1. What is that going to return? Think about it for a second. What is that going to return? It's going to return H. What if we do, a way to think about this is the difference between these two numbers, a kind of mental check. The difference between these two numbers is the number of characters that you should get out in your output. So the difference between 0 and 1 is one character. There's one difference. So there's one character as our output. There's a similar version of substring that omits the end. So if we simply write dot substring, int start, it will return the string. It'll return the string from wherever that index is all the way to the end of the string. Returns a string from start to the last index. And you might see why it doesn't like to give us the last value, right? Because if you put the last index number in here, or the length of the string in here, you're going to have a little problem because it's going to try to read past the end of the string. So dot substring, let's give an example. So if I say greeting dot substring of, let's say, 2. What is it going to do? It's going to go from 2 to the end, index 2 to the end. Let's take a look at our greeting here. And 2, index 2 is L, so it's going to be L, L, and O. So that's what my return value will be. Oops, didn't mean to move that. Stay there. Yes, thank you. So this will return for me L, L, O. I should put quotes on that H as well. All right, so the next one that we're going to do is a couple of interesting ones. I'm going to group these together. So there is the 2 uppercase, and this doesn't take any parameters, and also the 2 lowercase. So both of these, take out that, both of these return a copy in the changed case. So returns a copy, and it changes the entire string. So they become all upper or all lowercase letters. So it doesn't switch or flip or flop. It changes everything either to all uppercase or all lowercase, and it returns a copy. So it doesn't actually change the string, it only returns a copy. Last one that's a little tricky, but is an important one to know because this is definitely going to be on the AP exam. In fact, I'm going to put a little star on it. This is the compare to. So the compare to takes in a string type, some string, and it works a lot like our dot equals in that it's going to compare 2 strings. But what it does is it essentially alphabetizes. So it checks for alphabetical order. So if our variable over here is in front of this one. So it should be in front of it in alphabetical order. Then it's going to return a negative number. So this returns a negative number if, so it's going to give us a negative number. I'll go ahead and write that as a different color. So it gives us a negative number if our string is, I'm just going to abbreviate str, is smaller than substring. Okay, go ahead and expand that in your notes however you need to. And it's also going to return a positive number if our string is greater than or has a higher value than substring. So a string, let's say this is our string on the other side of str, is a, let's say it's an A, starts with an A, and substring starts with a B, it's going to return a negative value. If our string on this side of the dot, or on the left side of the dot, starts with a B, and substring starts with an A, it's going to return a positive value. That becomes really handy for sorting. And as you may have guessed, it's going to return 0 if they're equal. And this means equal all the way through. It's a completely equal string. If the first two characters are equal, it will check the next two characters all the way down the line until it's able to fully check those. So these have to be perfectly equal in their equality. All the way through the string, not just the first character. It compares all characters. So, well, it compares each character until it finds a difference. I should say that. I should be exact. Okay. So this is important and takes a while to wrap your head around. Don't worry about it. Let's take a quick example. So greeting.compare to, and let's say hi. Ooh, that's a tricky one. So as I said, it's going to compare the first two characters, and the first two characters are going to be the same. So it's going to check the next two characters. In the next two characters, we're going to be comparing hello to hi, so that's E to I. And that is going to be a different number. So it is going to return a negative value. Off the top of my head, I don't know what the negative value is, but it's going to be some negative value, telling us that the greeting is in front of our hi. Okay, so it's in front of hi in the alphabetical organization of these two words. All right, that was a huge amount of information, and I just realized that the entire thing is done wrong. So we're going to post the notes, and I'm still going to post this video because I'm not going to redo it a fourth time. I'll see you guys in the next one.